This is Karen on newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Lessons Learned. And the lessons learned today are about a subject that some of you may not have heard about. It's called the not mom. And the not mom is are women who either by choice or not their choice um, are not having children. And it's a very sensitive subject because, as most of us know, as soon as a woman hits a certain age, we all want to know, why she's not married, why she doesn't have kids, when it's all going to happen. And I can't tell you how many times I've been at a wedding and somebody will go up to the bride and say, "So, what's next? When are you getting pregnant?" Um, so we've decided to continue talking about this, and our first guest is Phyllis Klein. And Phyllis, you have a story behind this. So why don't you give us some idea of what it means to you to be a not mom?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I definitely relate to being asked at the wedding, what's next. I'm still a fairly newlywed. We've been married about a year and a half now. So I definitely can relate to that. And people are always wondering what's next for you in your life. But my background, somewhat of an interesting story. I grew up with a younger brother who's special needs, and that shaped me a lot in terms of seeing my parents struggle with that challenge and experiencing that challenge for myself. And there's an anecdote that my mom likes to tell. I had a moment when I was about 12 years old. My brother was being particularly difficult. My mother was struggling. And I just kind of looked at her and was like, why would anybody do this? Like, why, why would anyone choose this? And I'm sure at the moment I was just being maybe a snarky teen, but I think I also on a deep level just never really had that drive to, I didn't understand why people would want to take on those risks and those challenges. Um, and beyond that, I feel like a lot of people ask you for your reasonings of, well, why don't you want kids? And the simple reason, the overarching reason is I just don't. I never, some women desperately want that and they have this yearning and this feeling of, drive and passion, and I just don't. And I like children. I have 5 nieces and nephews who I love, and I'm really actually great with kids. I've had experience in the past working with children professionally, but I just don't have that sort of yearning that I think other people do.
Well, and we are all unique. And I know this may not sound like the best phrase, but we're like unique snowflakes. We all have our reasons for what we want, what we don't want. We're all shaped a little differently. Uh,
Right.
and I mean, I grew up in a home where all I could think about, someday I'm going to get married and I'm going to have kids. I'm going to be this great mom. And then my kids will go off and get married and I'll be a grandma and, on and on. Um, and even though I do have 2 sons, and I'm very blessed having them, um, it didn't turn out the way I really thought in
Mm.
my brain when I was a young kid it would be. And I have a number of friends who made the choice not to have children for a lot of various reasons. And it's not for me to choose for them. And I'm hoping that that message will get out as we talk about this more in depth and we have more women like yourself on, because the Not Mom group um, does talk about individuals like yourself who made the choice for whatever your personal reasons are. And those personal reasons don't need to be shared.
Mm.
Okay. I mean, that's the bottom line. Um, and there are others who are trying so desperately to have a child, and physically or emotionally, it's not happening. Um, and it's not for us to make that journey more painful for them as well. So I can understand you growing up in a household with a special needs sibling, um, that has to be very difficult. As loving as you may want to be, uh, your life sort of is not as neurotypical as maybe the next door neighbors. So, were Did your mom have you help raise your younger brother? Was that part of what was going on?
No, I would say actually that my life was fairly separate. I feel like I was blessed in that I had really great friends and I was very involved in extracurriculars, and I was able to have a rich, fulfilling life, childhood life outside of the home. So I no, I did not partake in raising him. And I think that I am blessed in that because I do see other families with multiple children, and that's another thing that I think is a turnoff for large families, is that they do sort of lose their childhood. If you're older with younger siblings, then you do sort of have to grow up quickly and learn to take care of them as well, which I don't necessarily think is very fair.
Well, life we know is not fair. Okay. I mean, that's the bottom line. My mother used to always tell me there was like a 18-year difference between her and her older sister. And when my mother was born, her oldest sister basically became the surrogate mom uh, because her mother had had a hard life coming from Europe. And even though my mother knew who her mother was, her older sister was the one who made her do things that even her own mother would never make her do.
Right.
And over the years, as they became adults, you could see that there had been resentment. So, um, that is difficult when you ask a sibling to, uh, partake in the development of another child in the family.
I think, like you said, parents have this idealized version of in their heads about how home life is going to go. And they imagine, when they think about having kids, they imagine coaching the soccer team and going to ballet recital and all the cute little outfits they're going to put them in. And they don't really think about, I think, the nitty gritty. And so that is definitely part of it, where, obviously a lot of my friends are at this stage in their life now where they are choosing to have kids, and that's fine for them and I support them. That's their choice and that's great. But I think it is sort of, especially now in the social media age, there's so much pressure to have these perfect pictures and these perfect little moments and memories, and that's not reality. That's not parenthood, and that's not childhood either.
Absolutely. As much as I use Facebook professionally, um, I don't think I've ever really posted a picture of either one of my sons. They both are grown, but I've never posted a picture to say, "Oh, look at this perfect family," because
Right.
I don't think there is a such thing as a perfect family. Um, and when you first started talking about, having a brother with special needs, I know that when I got pregnant with my second child, 15-year difference between him and his older sibling. I was already 40, and my fear was, oh my gosh, what if this, child um, isn't born healthy? What am I going to do? And those thoughts ran through my mind, and my husband and I just made this concerted effort. We wanted a child, and we would be blessed either way.
Mhm.
Um, Although now that I look back at it, I'm so grateful that we were blessed in the way we are. However, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum,
Mhm.
and for a very long time, that segregated us from a lot of people. Never resented having him, but I resented the fact that I gave him this burden, which I thought in life. Luckily, he is now 30 years old and doing very well on his own. And if you met him, you never would know. But if we had had other children living in the house, it would have been very difficult in raising him. Uh, so I applaud people who say, you know what, I'm not prepared. Okay.
Right.
There's no handbook. It doesn't tell you
And
what
that's
to do.
and I respect you so much for acknowledging that challenge and that it can be a struggle, and it doesn't mean that people don't love their kids or that we aren't um, blessed to have like you said, not neurotypical people in the world. I certainly celebrate diversity, but you have to be prepared to take on that challenge, and I know for myself that I'm not, and I'm just not willing to take the kind of risk that comes with motherhood. And people don't really think about how many things, how many challenges you could face. You could have a child that is born deaf or blind or, with cerebral palsy or wheelchair bound. Or, I mean, there's millions of things challenges that could be put in your way. So if you're in your head thinking, well, I just want to coach the soccer team and go to ballet practice, that's not parenthood. So I just know that I'm not equipped for that.
So when you met your husband, when he was the first date or whatever, um, how soon did the two of you come to this realization that you weren't going to have children?
So actually, we met online. We met on OkCupid, and we both specifically were looking for another partner who is child-free by choice, because I had come from a relationship previously where I was with a man for several years who I love very much. And ultimately, we decided we had to go our separate ways because he wanted kids and I didn't. And that was obviously very painful at the time, but it was the right thing to do for both of us. And I still care for him, and we keep in touch. But moving on from that, I knew that right away I needed to prioritize finding a partner who shared that common value, and not waste my time or anyone else's time. So we both went looking for that specifically.
And that's interesting, and that's important too, because I'm sure it could be very difficult um, if you didn't have that conversation ahead of time. Now you get married, and a year, 2 years down the line, it's like, okay. And it's like, okay, what? Because I know when I married my current husband, he's my second husband. I had a child from my first marriage, and I really, at that point, said, I don't want any more kids. We had been through a custody battle and everything else, and was like, this is too much. I deserve to be happy. And a couple years later, the two of us were sitting somewhere just looking at each other. And we both said it at the same time. Wouldn't we like to have a child together? And, he was accepting prior to that. And I think if I would have said to him at that point, no, I still remain that I don't want any more children, I'm sure he would have gone along with it because that's the type of guy he is. But we both seemed to come to that realization at the same time. Yes, we wanted to try again. But you mentioned in your email to me something that sort of bothers me. Um, you don't bother me, but the subject matter bothered me.
Yeah.
You said that there is almost like a fraction between women who have chosen not to have children and the women who can't have children. So, do you have any idea where that's all stemming from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is unfortunate because it just paints us into small little corners and it limits our social scape. You would think that women, either way, we're adults without children, and we should be able to find things in common. We can talk about our Peloton or our
Right.
Instant Pot or our dogs or whatever. But there, I think, is a deep resentment stemming from the sadness and the loss. I think that women who wanted children and for whatever reason couldn't have them, they feel that they've suffered a loss, and they do feel probably resentful, angry, sadness. So I think looking at a woman who it may or may not be healthy or be able to have children and is for whatever reason choosing not to, I think that it's hard to find empathy there and to find a common ground, because in my case, I am happy with my choice and I like my life without children, versus I have girlfriends who desperately want children and for whatever reason can't have them, and they look at their quiet empty house and feel loss and they feel sadness. So as much as I would try to empathize with that, I don't think that I could ever really put myself in their shoes and know what that feels like, because I don't, like I said in the beginning, I don't have that longing, and that yearning. So yeah, I think that it's difficult to maintain those friendships, and it's equally difficult to maintain my friendships with women who are mothers as well. Just because, again, we lack commonality. Their world revolves around breastfeeding and baby toys and diapers and or whatever stage their children are in, if they're not babies, but their world revolves around their kids as it should. If for if you're a great parent, your world revolves around your children. But I'll never be able to relate to that. And so we drift apart and we lose that, unfortunately.
But I think it's only fair in today's society that we have to start accepting each other for our choices. Um, you know, so many different races, so many different sexualities, um, people making choices to have children later in life, and sometimes they're not able to. People choosing not to have children, people who are adopting children from all over the world. Um, those are our personal choices. And when we can stop judging each other about, well, Phyllis, why don't you want to have kids?
Right.
It's okay. You've chosen to be with your partner, your husband, and like you said, you can still enjoy your nieces and nephews. You can enjoy your friends' kids. Um, maybe even work with kids, but it doesn't mean that your household is any emptier than anybody else's without a
Right.
child.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that sentiment with everyone. I hope that everyone will heed that message, and that we can all be a little more empathetic and not try to insert ourselves into other people's lives. I think what I've noticed too, especially from maybe close family and friends, is that they feel a sense of loss as well. Like maybe they feel like, oh, well, I was looking forward to the day that you would be a mother, or I had pictured us being moms together and raising our kids, or so I think other people also have this narrative for your life, and when you go off script, that can
They-
hurt.
well, and they can be disappointed, but again, it's not their life. Okay. They've made their choices in their life, whether it was to have children or not have children, to adopt, not to adopt. Um, and that's where, this last year has really gotten us here at New Cleveland Radio to look at the bigger picture. Okay. Um, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about all lives matter. And that means we all have to make choices. And it's not for us to walk down the street and make assumptions. Um, I was on the weekends, I work in a retail store as a trainer. And I had a woman walk up to me today who I would have sworn, if I didn't know better, that she was about to deliver a baby. She looked very pregnant and only in one area. The rest of her was very, very thin. But I knew not to say a word. Okay. Um, and I found out afterwards she's a surrogate. Okay.
Mm,
Because her friend came in and they were trying to buy a computer together. And I don't know how, I don't even remember how the conversation started, but it was like, okay. And this woman even said she doesn't want children. She's willing to carry children for people, but as far as being a mother, that's not important to her. And we got into this conversation. I just thought it was so unique that it was happening as we're starting out this new series. Um,
that
so
must be very difficult for her to be so outwardly pregnant in public, and probably people want to pry and comment and they don't know her situation. As women, we can't hide that. It's so visible. So wow, that's a really unique situation for her.
But I was glad I was wearing a mask because my first reaction was, wow, I need to get her a chair. She's about to deliver. And then her friend just openly starts talking about this. And we need to have more frank conversations. Um, we don't want you and your husband to lose friends because you've chosen not to have kids. Um, so, how do you deal with that in your social life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky. We live in Silicon Valley, California, in the Bay Area. So it's very progressive and liberal. And we do have quite a number of friends who are also child free by choice. And that's been very lucky for us. Actually, just today we met up with one of our good friends, and our two dogs had a little play date in the park, and it was very cute. So, we have friendships like that where we can get together for the things that we do enjoy, and not with kids, activities that don't include kids. But I think, other than that, we talked about empathy. I think there's a difference. Some people who are child free by choice actively are uncomfortable with children or around them, or maybe they just don't like them, they don't have experience with them. That's not the case for me. As I mentioned, I'm great with kids actually, but my husband isn't necessarily in that boat. He used to be a high school teacher. So he's okay with like older kids. He can deal with, we took our older niece and nephew to Disneyland before COVID. So he can deal with, preteens and teens, but little babies, I feel like he would be completely lost. So right now in these years in our early to mid 30s when everyone has little kids, it's challenging. It's hard to find activities that we can all do together that are enjoyable for everyone, that are also kid friendly and also adult and child free friendly. So
Absolutely. Well, I'm
it's a
sure their kids like playing with your dogs. So, I mean,
yeah.
that's a good combination as well. Um, and we have to look for those areas where we can be non-judgmental and we can come together and find things that, are going to work for us. You you found out about this podcast through the Not Mom. How did
Mhm.
you learn about the Not Mom organization?
Yeah, again, I think I actively went looking for it when I had come off of that breakup in my mid 20s. And I was looking for a sense of community and just kind of a sense of belonging after, losing someone that I really loved and cared about, who was my best friend. And we had been together for many years. And so that was a really challenging time in my life. And I felt like, okay, I really want to embrace this newfound identity and find people with common values. And so I went looking for them. And uh, back when they were having conferences, they were
Right.
doing the Not Mom conference. And so I had really wanted to go, but unfortunately didn't get the opportunity. And then that stopped happening in person. I hope that that will happen again in person. I'd love to meet everyone and be together. But yeah, that was something that I was very interested in, and I really just wanted that tribe of women to give me strength and make me feel like I was on a good path and that I hadn't just that I hadn't just ruined my life with this decision. So they've been very helpful.
Well, in knowing one of the founders of the group, I know Karen Malone is very dedicated to the organization. Um, and she is not a not mom by choice, but she's had to deal with her own inner feelings, but she's friends with anyone with kids, without kids. And I know sometimes it can be difficult. Um, I tried to relate to her one day when my oldest son was 11. He went to live with his dad, and that was on the opposite side of the state here. And there were weeks I felt like the not mom. I had no communication with my son, and it was like he just didn't exist. And then he'd come up for a weekend to visit, and it'd be like, it was almost like I was his aunt more than his mom.
Mhm.
Um, and so when I met Karen Malone, I realized that there was something that I could identify with. Yes, I was a mom, but I wasn't doing the mother things at the time.
Mhm.
And that in itself is a very awkward position to be in. But I just chose that I wasn't going to ruin the rest of my life for it. And someday, um, he will come back into my life more as a son than, a visitor. And that did happen. Um, Looking forward, um, your life with your husband. So you said he was a high school teacher or he still is?
He was for many years. He used to be a high school science teacher, and then he transitioned his science career into the tech industry, which is why we live in Silicon Valley now. So he's an executive for a tech company.
Okay. So you two have a very active life with work
Mhm.
and each other. Um, So, what is the message that you really want everyone to hear?
I think the message is, just what you touched on, which is that we should all be free to make our own choices and we should support each other, especially as women. I feel like all women should support each other in our choices. And especially now, um, with the political climate being as it has been the last few years, you know, be a champion for other women and be a champion for reproductive rights and reproductive justice. I think that whether people choose to have kids or not, we all need to be able to access those choices. So I support mothers. I support their right to be able to get pregnant. I support their journey, and I think that they should be able to get quality care. I think that we should have, paid parental leave. I think that we should have childcare options that are affordable. All of that, I will champion all of that for them, and I feel like I hope that they will also champion my rights and my privileges, I guess, and make sure that we can all be free to make those choices.
Absolutely. Well, what I also want people to understand is that just because a couple is married, it is not our right to ask them what their next step is. When are you
Absolutely.
going to get pregnant? Or if they have a child, when are you going to have your next child? Um, that's something between a husband and wife, two partners. They make that choice, and it doesn't make them any less a relative, a friend, um, whatever you want to call them. Uh, you know, let's just open our arms because there's too many arguments going on in this world, and we certainly don't need it over choices that don't affect the next guy. And
Well, and that's what I think people don't, they want to relate to others and they don't realize that for the vast majority of people in my life, even my immediate family, my choice to not have children doesn't affect them in their daily life. It's really about me and my husband and our life together. Whether or not people agree with that decision, they have to realize that it's not about them.
well, and I totally can understand that. Like I said, I have two grown sons. One is in his 40s, one is 30, and neither one of them are in a serious relationship. And
Mhm.
I'm not sitting here telling them, oh, time's running out, guys. You got to go get married. You
Right.
got to have kids. It's their life. They get to choose what is important to them. Um, and I don't have to make their journey through life difficult by imposing my needs on them. And the reality of it is, they are my needs. I've got my children, and whatever comes after that is fine. Um, Again, I made my choices. It's time for
Yeah.
them to make theirs.
And I think that's a really refreshing perspective, even though you mentioned in the beginning that you did have dreams of becoming a grandmother or do. So I'm sure that that would bring some sense of disappointment, some sense of loss to you if that doesn't happen for you in your life. But I think that that's very big of you to be able to recognize that,
Well,
it's their
I
lives
also
and their choices.
I also realize I can save some money. I don't have to buy all those Christmas presents and birthday presents. And I get to hold other people's babies, when I see them. And you know what? I've done my share of changing diapers. But if it happens in my lifetime, it will happen. But again, it's not my life, it's theirs. I want to wish you and your husband lots of energy and love going forward. Um, what we're going to do in the near future, after we've done a number of these single podcasts, is we're going to try to do a couple roundtable ones so that not moms can actually talk to each other. I want to have someone like yourself by choice, somebody else, not choice, and how the two of you can meet somewhere in between and find that comfort level.
That sounds great. I would love to be a part of that.
Very good. Well, have a great day. Enjoy the West Coast. It feels like spring here in Cleveland. So I think I'm going to go for a walk. So
All right. You enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank
thank
you so
you.
much for
Thank you.
chatting with me.
Thanks. Have a great day. Bye
All
bye
right.
now.
Bye bye.